New Vegas often paints morality in shades of gray rather than black and white, but just like the real world, there is exceptions.
There is no good and evil. There is only power. And those too weak to seek it.
5 to be exact, with the NPCs boasting a very evil karma status. I figured in this video it would be fun to just kind of babble on about these very evil NPCs and whether their reputation is merited or not. I'm also going to be going over 5 additional NPCs in the game that aren't very evil karma-wise, but easily could be. These are the 5 very evil NPCs in Fallout New Vegas.
Ring a ding, baby.
Mortimer and Phillipe come in at a duo at number 5 and 4 respectively. They are the High Society, that is the White Glove Society, residing on the Strip in the bougie Ultra Luxe Casino. The group has a ghastly past of practicing cannibalism when the Strip's population were divided into clans or tribes, before Mr. House was in the picture. These 2 very evil NPCs in particular are completely like gung-ho on regressing the timeline, regarding, nom-nomming on some people, these 2 being, most commonly associated with the infamous quest Beyond the Beef, where you find Heck Gunderson's son being held hostage like cattle, where you can either save him or not from being put on a plate then served with a side of veggies. Mortimer's scheme all really boils down to him tricking the unbeknownst members of the White Gloves to dine and dash on humans, making everyone get caught, I guess, with their hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, without them knowing, in an attempt to basically shame or hope they liked it, I guess, in the process, sort of thing. It's kind of a weird plan, but he's trying to get the White Gloves to embrace their tribe's past heritage and turn human flesh into a delicacy once again at the gourmand. The White Glove Society is a very tongue-in-cheek approach on classism, and Mortimer is like the poster child of this high society's, sycophantic nature. He just constantly belittles people who he views as less than and boasts never-endingly about how the Ultra Luxe has the best cuisine in the entire Mojave wasteland, bar none.
Fellow members of the White Glove Society, bon appetit.
He's a narcissistic prick that thinks his shit don't stink, and there's tons of these people even in the real world, and they all remain just as insufferable as the next. But really, what grants Mortimer his classification of very evil karma within the game is, of course, his insistence on the White Gloves returning to cannibalism. Phillipe by proximity is also very evil for more or less the same reasons as Mortimer, as he's, the head chef at the Ultra Luxe, and he's also the one aiding his cannibalistic coup to serve people. Phillipe himself is pretty unhinged and constantly attacks and berates his staff members beneath them. Just kind of like Mortimer, he believes in hierarchies and he thinks he's better than everyone else. And just like a lot of people who are devoid of empathy, Phillipe himself had a rough childhood and was abused and neglected, so that's probably a reason that's causing his inferiority complex in the present, I guess. Overall, I'd say these 2 are very deserving of their very evil karma status because they're conscious, they choose to perpetuate evil versus something like, circumstantial or like doing bad acts through desperation. And just this element of choice really does kind of put a magnifying glass on their atrocities. It is much more evil in my eyes than people who act out of desperation or through clouded judgment from things like mental health or addiction or both. Cannibalism is very common historically during fucked up scenarios like famines and natural disasters. Mortimer and his right-hand man enacting this willingly as they sit comfortable in the lap of luxury with more or less all of their needs met, contrasted with the people who harsh the Mojave wastes day by day, really does make them irredeemable in my eyes. The White Gloves are also kind of a fun spin on, there's some people who just hate all rich people, but fun spin on, the elites, you know, as a lot of times, like, people who are really rich and powerful are often so bored with their lifestyles at some point they basically chase any dragon that money can buy. They seek out their own quest, so to speak, to stave off boredom and to find their next adrenaline hit. Money really can be the root of all evil, but it's more or less the power that large sums of money brings that really can cloak the atrocities perpetuated by the elite. While the average Joe gets crucified to the cross for crimes much less. It exposes a two-tiered justice system that is classism. And really, that's what the White Glove Society portrays within New Vegas. And once upon a time, I would have said, you know, this portrayal was comical or exaggerated. It's pretty fucking accurate to the real world, which is crazy and unfortunate. Coming in at number 3 on this list is none other than the asshole with the dog on his head, as, you know, Boxcars puts it, Vulpes Inculta.
Don't act like you'd be doing me a favor. I don't give a fuck.
Vulpes is one of the many right-hand men of Caesar, leads the Frumentari that marauded the merciless assault on Nipton, where you are most likely to first see him. He also infamously distributed the lottery that Oliver Swank is oh so grateful in winning, and can you blame him?
Stop bothering me, will ya? I won the fucking lottery!
Caesar's or Kaisar's Legion just in general has a ton of cut content. It definitely got the short end of the stick in terms of, you know, fleshing out by comparison to something like the NCR. They're marauders, slavers, and the perpetrators of crucifixions. They are brutal and constantly swarm and take over territory, all while swallowing tribes whole, then spitting them back out in the image of their own, all within the framework of the imperial ancient Roman Empire. The Legion is almost portrayed as cartoonishly evil at times within the game, but there is still remnants of shades of gray within New Vegas as seen in the endgame slideshows, with the Legion bringing some calm through their brutality on certain trade routes. They do bring order, you know, and I think Obsidian really did want to do more with the Legion. That fast development cycle, you know. Vulpes is really one bad dude, more or less has climbed the fucked up corporate ladder within the Legion. Originally from a tribe out of Utah, he started as a young wee lad, coming into the Legion's possession as just a mere child. Him being ambitious by definition within this brutal faction, of course, requires heinous acts. Overall, Vulpes Inculta definitely earned his badge of merit regarding his status in game. A few atrocities the asshole with the dog on his head has spearheaded his genocide on the tribe dubbed the Twisted Hairs at Dry Wells, took out Camp Searchlight by unleashing radioactive material into the air, deliberately turning the town into a glowing radioactive hotspot, ghoulifying or straight up killing all of the NCR residents in the process. He has led countless successful pushes into NCR territory, claiming more and more land for the Legion. And this is just to name a few, and of course, you know, he devastated Nipton. He has not only earned his title of very evil, but actively pursues it. It is a weird mentality because the wasteland itself is very harsh. Even, you know, good people have to do questionable shit from time to time, and Vulpes brought into the fold of the Legion at such a young age has no doubt warped his mind. He obviously has his whole identity wrapped up into the Legion itself and fully drinks the Kool-Aid with a full chest. He likely views the Legion as a whole in a fundamentalist way with very little room for interpretation, viewing his actions and largely the Legion's actions as a whole as morally just. It's kind of, you know, like the Nuremberg trials perspective in a way, right? He's a soldier and he's doing what he sees as right. He's the definition of if he changed his talents for the better instead of, you know, enslaving populations, killing mass amounts of people and crucifying victims who refuse to submit to the Legion, he would likely be a beneficial force for the Mojave. As it stands, his personal ambition and placement within the Legion fuels his callousness. His brainwashed mind views wrongdoings as perceived righteousness for the cause, and he actively fights for the Legion, tooth and nail.
Hey there, sweet thing. Want to ride on the Cook Express? Who am I? I'm the scariest motherfucker you ever gonna meet. I'm Cook, bitch. Better not forget it.
Cook is the hulking pyromaniac beefy boy that asserts his dominance over the lesser on a constant basis. This dude is pretty terrifying. Like, I always got the ick from Cook, like genuinely for real. For obvious reasons, but he's kind of like the epiphany of the big cock on the block. You know, kind of like a jailbird kind of dude that has similar hobbies to Harvey Weinstein regarding his female victims. He's also a cannibal, even though that's not a primary focal point of him in game and requires a little bit of digging to uncover. Supposedly, you know, like his name, he's a pretty damn good cook. He probably wouldn't be cooking at the Ultralux, but according to the fiends, if that's anything to go by, he can cook some grub. When meat is low, he has also been known to do dealings with the Epstein associates that are St. James and Dermot of Westside to re-up on some quote-unquote fresh meat.
Fresh meat.
Dude's a savage. The name fiends within New Vegas are intriguing, you know, once you take into account their cut dialogue. That just adds a bit of backstory and more personality to them overall. All of the unique fiends are addicted to different chems that have different effects on your mind. You know, Violetta is a tweaker, likely suffering from almost like an amphetamine-induced psychosis from the chem turbo. She's paranoid.
Dogs? Good dogs. My dogs. Fiend dogs. Tear you up. Arf, 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 arf.
Driver Nefarious is just kind of like blunt and heartless, showing almost no emotion, being absolutely devoid of it. He's like zombified state and is addicted to Psycho, Med-X, and Buff-Out. And our boy Cook is seemingly addicted to Mentats, the smart drug. Cook being addicted to Mentats, it's like the smart yuppie drug. It really does kind of heighten his grotesque nature of his love and affinity for all things burnt extra crispy. And of course some grapey. He's a bad dude. He likely uses Mentats to sharpen his mind, all while devising or scheming up intricate ways of inflicting pain on anyone in his near vicinity, with his victims, especially outside of his fiend forces, taking the ultimate brunt of his callous abuse. He shows some elements of humanity, and he really loves his Brahmin he names Queenie, and if you kill this Brahmin, he'll throw a temper tantrum and he'll go in like a full sight of red-fueled rage, slaying anyone in close proximity, even his fiend brethren, through a frenzy of madness, or himself dying in the process, especially if you're higher level. The fiends actually level up with you, so they can actually be higher level than him. Yeah. The reason I'm bringing up their particular addictions and how they reflect on the fiends individually is because Cook, he seems more sentient. By comparison to someone like Violetta or Driver Nefarious, he doesn't seem as lost in the sauce. He seems conscious enough to know right versus wrong. And he just seems to kind of get off on the brutality of it all. He just loves violence, right? Seeming to derive pleasure through sheer dominance. Although this is largely through inference regarding his general demeanor on my part, he is a big name within the fiend ranks, being Motor Runner's second-hand man in leading the fiends of the Mojave, so he has to be somewhat there. He's also one of two fiends that is labeled with the status of very evil karma, saying a shit ton about him regarding the depths of his depravity. When you're up against a group of drug-addled raiders that embody pure cruelty as easily as breathing air day to day, and still stick out like a sore thumb and rise above the rest of the wickedness, that's pretty compelling. And the fiends in general do bring up a complex issue of addiction, compounded by just the nature of the wasteland itself. It's a dog-eat-dog world that inherently breeds ruthlessness in the population by default, which really all leads to the last very evil NPC of this video, none other than the other fiend, Duke. Duke is a complete enigma, but he's likely like a lot of NPCs in this game, a victim of the fast development cycle that left a ton of pieces on the cutting room floor. Unlike driver Nephi, Cook, and Violetta, who had complete dialogue lines recorded left in the game's files, there's no dialogue or quest or lore or even remnants of anything of the sorts with Dusty Duke here. He was likely going to play some role regarding a quest with the Fiends and probably either siding with them or deleting them from existence for the NCR or something like that, in the typical de facto New Vegas branching choice, you know. He's very easy to miss, residing within Zap's neon signs in the South Vegas ruins within Fiend territory. Unlike other Fiends, he comes equipped ready for battle with a full set of metal armor, with him and our boy Cook being the only Fiends to rock a fit outside of the typical edgy Fiend garb. He's also very dangerous and tactical, using the environment to his advantage, using gas canisters as impromptu explosives, shooting the canisters to release deadly explosions at the courier when engaging him in combat. Everything about Duke, however, is completely shrouded in mystery, but the only thing you can infer about this man is he's a leader of the Fiends and he's of high ranking. And he's of course in this video and in this section of this video, so he's very evil. But this very evil status in terms of what he's done is a blank slate, but you don't really need that much imagination to guess that he's probably not a very nice guy. Driver Nephi having the backstory of running down people, then bashing their heads in with his golf club. Then you got Violetta with her mangy mutts and feeds them the human meat of her victims laced with turbo. Then you have Cook having an affinity for cooking meals and people with his flamethrower, along with Weinsteining women, are all fleshed out lore within the game that you can actually uncover. But with Duke, his escapades are, as I already stated, a complete enigma, leaving all up to your imagination. I always assumed, based on my gut alone, Duke was somewhat put together, similar to Cook and Motor Runner. You know, the bee's knees of the Fiend organization in some capacity, with likely Motor Runner being the brains, Cook being the bronze, and Duke here being possibly one or the other or a mix of the two. He could have been the second in command, much like Cook, or, you know, he could have been also been like the warlord, essentially, that led further assaults against the NCR, establishing more and more Fiend territory. Who knows? Whether or not he's deserving of his crown regarding his very evil karma, it's just speculation again. Broken record, but he nonetheless was meant to be much more fleshed out, making his background a fat question mark. Now I'm gonna go over 5 more contenders that don't quite make the cut of very evil, karma-wise, within the game, and this is just 5. There's a ton of really bad people in New Vegas, as the Mojave is not short on psychopaths. These 5 easily could be perceived as very evil and are in no particular order, starting at number 5 being the duo of St. James and Dermot of Westside. These two Westside residents pose as friendly entrepreneurs, but run a lucrative, depraved human trafficking ring. They initially say they're basically prospectors and they go out and they salvage. You know, that's kind of like their front. But they lure desperate, starving refugees and orphans and all other types of vulnerable populations into traps, including children. There's also a thing where in the quest The Coyotes, St. James, he keeps a teddy bear of one of his victims in his room while he pays for the service of a lady of the night, and he sold said little victim to be tortured and killed. And they're also known to be Epstein associates, as I already mentioned. They're creepers and a Chester, if you get my drift. It's incredibly dark subject matter, probably some of the darkest in Fallout, honestly. Their ledger explicitly details selling children even to be cannibalized to the Fiends or tortured by Cook. Yet the game groups them into a standard evil karma rating rather than very evil, which is pretty crazy. At number 4, we have Clandon. He's a generic kind of run-of-the-mill serial killer, torturer, and snuff item enjoyer. You know, keeps it as a memento. And he works for the Omertas. He gets off on slowly torturing prostitutes original, bro. And he operates right on the strip in the Gomorrah. Despite him being a literal psychopathic serial killer operating right on the strip, the game only marks him as, the standard evil. The Omertas in general are an extremely shady bunch that run their business like a mob. Well, they basically are a mob. They run extortion, drug dealing, prostitution, and so on, being their main business model. So Clandon himself really is kind of like the underbelly of this lifestyle. He's like the festering maggot in the rot that is the gangster life. And I'd say his evil, karma is fair, but it can go both ways, Obviously, the dude's not a good dude and he derives pleasure from torturing people, so that's why he's on here. And then at number 3, we have a familiar face, the sweet-talking middle-aged manager of Novak running the motel. All New Vegas veterans know this one, and she is one deceptively bad bitch who secretly sold Boone's pregnant wife Carla into Legion slavery because she found Carla was, snobby and she didn't like the town. How dare her?
She never did take to living here. She liked the big lights and fast living of New Vegas.
She pocketed the caps all while watching Boone slowly lose his mind with grief without an ounce of remorse. Jeannie Mae holds an evil karma rating as well, which is very justified. I mean, this woman is straight up cold-blooded, and I never ever feel bad when Boone pops her head like a grape on most of my playthroughs. She committed one of the most greedy, vile, apathetic, and heartless acts of all time, and she did it all with a smile.
Looking for a fix, man? I got what you need.
At number 2, we have Dixon. Dixon is a very interesting character. I always thought he was very interesting. He's a predatory drug pusher that operates in the slums of Freeside. He deliberately preys on the vulnerable. He actively tries to destroy lives by hooking them on chems, all for profit. But he even goes beyond this. It's not just to make a buck. He explicitly admits that he doesn't just sell drugs for that sole reason alone. He gets a thrill out of watching, talented, good people reduce themselves to do desperate things, becoming junkies. He gets off on misery, he gets off on pain, he gets off on suffering. He is a psychological parasite who systematically destroys the minds willingly of other people who are down on their lucks otherwise, like gamblers, who didn't make it big in New Vegas. He's a perfect example of, you don't have to just worry about guns and big thugs and big muscle meatheads coming at you. It's not just physical threats that you have to worry about. It's people like this. And even though he is definitely less of a contender than a lot of people we talked about on this list, I think he is very evil, and I always kill him once I reach Freeside on most of my playthroughs. And then finally, coming in at number 1 is a bit of a cop-out on me, but I just put Caesar here, and everyone knows who Caesar or Caesar is. He's the dictator responsible for the systematic enslavement, cultural erasure, torture, and crucifixion of thousands of innocent people across the wasteland. He orders the absolute slaughter of towns like Nipton and treats human beings as disposable property. He actually has neutral karma, but this is because he's a major faction. So the game likely gives you, leeway in terms of who you want to pick towards your ending, who you want to side with. So while you're working with him, you don't automatically get penalized by the karma. But he, of course, is a contender for the very evil karma rating, as the Legion's atrocities kind of speak for itself. And with this man at the helm of it all, makes him an easy contender for very evil in my eyes. For the sake of the length of this video, like, comment, subscribe, and with all that said, Fallout fans, I really do hope to see you in the next one.